Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful week so far. Today, I have for you a variety of things. But before that, we are entering the busy period of FPL. We have game weeks in such a congested period of time again and again and again. The swings can be huge, both positively and negatively. So if there was ever a time to take it seriously, it would be now. If there was ever a time to get it right, it would be now. So you want to make sure that you're putting as much emphasis on making the correct decision as possible each and every time, because you make so many decisions each and every week. Today, I have for you a variety of things, but essentially, I'm just solving your problems. Like it says in the title of the video, I've taken the feedback from the comments that you've got, what you want to be talked about. I've looked at X, and of course, I have solved your problems for you. As we approach 5,000 subscribers, especially if you're one of the people who watch regularly but have not subscribed, of which there are thousands of you, quite literally, I would very much appreciate if you press that button. Like I said, announcement to follow soon, and some of you will be very excited. Very. Nothing else needs to be said, however, so let's hop into the video. Starting in a very similar fashion to last week, we're going to look at my own team and one decision that I am potentially considering changing. Last week, it was starting João Pedro ahead of Morgan Rogers, and that worked wonderfully well. And those 10 points were huge for me last week. Just grand scheme of things, especially when you look at it in a relative sense. And this week, I'm actually considering doing something I hadn't thought about beforehand, and that is starting Lewis Hall. Why? Well, there's two people I could potentially start him over: Lewis Dunk or Ryan Aït-Nouri. I'd start him over Lewis Dunk if I don't get a leak, and I'm not confident he's going to start, because if Brighton are cruising against Southampton, it's a very good way to reintroduce him before the busy period, so he just gets some minutes in his leg. He adjusts to the tempo a little bit quicker for when he does start, and in general, he just gets into the flow of things a little more. Alternatively, I could just play him right, and it is Southampton at home, which is one of the better fixtures. Look, I rate Southampton. I rate their attack. I like the way they play to an extent, with certain things not considered, but regardless, they've got a goal in them, and I can appreciate that. But it's still one of the better fixtures in the league. So if not starting him in 13, then what was the point of even buying him in the first place, right? Like 15 is a great fixture, as Leicester away, but I would prefer to have Southampton at home than Leicester away, considering that they've got a new manager in Ruud van Nistelrooy, who will certainly play a more attacking brand of football than Steve Cooper did. So that's one person I could start him over. Then the other would be Ryan Aït-Nouri, because I've gone on all week and said that I expect Bournemouth to score, but it's the position Aït-Nouri is taking up there. So, well, am I not limiting my ceiling then somewhat? And it's something I always preach about to an extent, and that is upside maximization. And I wouldn't be doing that in this case. Yes, of course, I accept that Ryan Aït-Nouri could potentially keep a clean sheet. I just don't think, however, he will. So then I am somewhat limiting my ceiling. He's such a high floor defender because he's obviously got the clean sheet potential given the good fixtures, albeit fairly low. And then he's got such a high floor resultant of the attacking returns as well. And when you buy him, the thing about Hall is I fancy his clean sheet prospects, not hugely, but they're there and they're decent. And I would say they're certainly higher than Ryan Aït-Nouri's in my opinion. And from what we saw against West Ham, he has the not only the quality, but he's taking up the positions and he has the responsibility in the attacking third to generate those returns, right? You saw so many times against West Ham. For example, he could have scored in that second half when Isak put a short corner into him, and that would have been the dream goal for me. Could have had an assist for the first half when he played Isak in, like, through the lines. He was just getting in very good positions in general, high volume of passes in and around those areas. A lot of good progressive passes. That's something he possesses, right? He has the ability to punch the ball through. He's got that quality. Whereas someone like Udogie, respectfully, and I mean that with the respect, when he gets into those positions, doesn't have that small space or just technical quality to an extent. So, with Palace not having Eze, I am benching a guy with a decent clean sheet prospect, decent haul prospect in relative terms. So that's something I could reverse. I'm considering actually benching Aït-Nouri. If you ask me now, that's where I'm going, just to maximize upside. But that is something I thought I'd discuss. I will of course update you with a post on YouTube, just like I did last week. So make sure to be around or just check it maybe like 5-10 minutes before the deadline. And talking about deadlines, something just to note, there is a Friday deadline this week. So you'll be watching it on Friday and the deadline will be on the same day. And the next deadline is on the Tuesday. I say this because I was recording with Jack and I actually forgot that the deadline was on Friday. And I didn't even realize the next one was on Tuesday. So definitely be aware of that. I told you the game weeks are coming thick and fast. Decisions are so important. And now that you know they're coming thick and fast, consider injury, rotation, suspensions, transfers and the depth of your squad, etc. But I just thought I'd remind you, because the last thing you'd want to do is forget. I know a few people who activated their wildcard, didn't activate their wildcard because they forgot to press the button, ended up taking like a -44. And this would be in the similar realm of mistakes, so I wouldn't want you. Should you sell Bruno Fernandes? Well, there I ask if you would keep Enzo Fernandez. And whilst they're not the same, right? Anyways, they have some similarities which must be accounted for. Man United played tonight and they won 3-2 in the Europa League. And after the game against Ipswich, Amorim spoke about how he likes having Bruno deeper and how he likes having him not back to goal, but having the game in front of him. He essentially spoke about that again tonight and showed that with his positioning. And it's looking very much like that Bruno is going to play in this pivot. And if he's going to play as a pivot, he will likely be a deep lying playmaker, similar to Enzo Fernandez. Now, one of the reasons I did pick him is due to the name, but they also share that quality when playing in their when Enzo's playing in his ideal position and Bruno now. And would you have Enzo Fernandez in your team? No way, right? Especially against Everton. Like, they're a decent side. And from a defensive standpoint in particular, you're probably not going to create too many chances. And he's probably not going to be on the goal scoring end of that either. So for me, when he's this expensive, when the fixtures are turning already, when there's really good opportunities elsewhere, I would be moving on. I wouldn't even think about it twice. If I had Bruno this week, I'd sell. Even if it was for a 1 week punt to Brian and Buemo, I'd probably still sell. That's how pessimistic I am on his chances, especially his chances of accessing his ceiling, like we saw against Leicester. Before we move on to the question about selling him for a hit, would I be keeping him in any instance, and do I expect him to return to the pivot? I mean, return to the front three? He could potentially return to the front three. But my issue was still against Ipswich, which was a very poor performance. And I think the dynamics in the front three aren't set yet. Personally, I prefer a more associative left left forward, who is more comfortable back to goal, dropping into the pockets, functioning in small spaces, as opposed to having two runners. So if he's going to have Haaland as the 9, which I imagine, right, especially following the brace tonight, if it's Rashford on the left, I don't love that for him from all United's overall chances of generating output and scoring goals. So for me, even if he is to play there, the prospects aren't great. And look, even if he has like Mount on the other side, then the responsibilities will be shared. So for me, just no absolute sell. Like, most people wouldn't see this as an absolute sell. For me, though, with the opportunity cost, this is an absolute. Would I be selling him for a hit? Look, it's situational because you have to see how bullish you are on Bruno or bearish. You're probably not as bearish on me as me. You're also probably not as bullish as me on someone like Saka. And that's the move I've seen spoken about a lot. Some people also are talking about Bruno to Palmer. Would I be doing that for a hit? Look, I think one thing is you always have to factor in the captaincy. If you're moving to a player you're going to captain, it pretty much automatically becomes worth it. Let's double the upside now, right? Let's just assume that you're not going to captain him. Would I go to Saka and would I go to Palmer? Would I go to Saka? Yes, because I'm so bullish on him. But in your case, I think it's a far closer call. I guess FPL theory would say absolutely not. I personally still would, just given how I feel about the prospects this week. Would I take a hit to Palmer? I just really struggle to see Bruno getting much. I probably would. Okay, if we assume that Bruno blanks, then the worst case is that you lose 4. The upside's a lot bigger, right? Bruno scores. It's still like the Palmer haul or the Saka haul is very much there, even with 1 goal, depending on how the rest of the game goes for bonus and their team. So for me, even for a hit, I'd sell him. That's how bearish I am. Now, should you sell Erling Haaland? Earlier this week, I discussed at length why personally that the no Haaland strategy could be permanent and the reasons for that. This is not about that. This is more of practical application and why or why not I would or wouldn't be selling him. Let's ignore him in isolation for a second and we'll come back to that. What he's blocking for a lot of you specifically, the Ment. For you guys specifically, if I look at the ownership, there's a lot of teams, Saka and no Jack. 2 differentials in a way, given-ish, that I think are magnificent. And you would have seen over my videos over the last week or 2 how bullish I am on both. He's blocking that for a lot of you because, as I said, they're differentials because a lot of people don't own him. You guys, in a lot of your cases, won't own him. And that's what he's blocking. He's blocking the easiest, simplest, and fastest route to them. A lot of upside to give up. It's also a lot of protection to give up because their floors are both so high, especially with the fixture quality for the period of time, the fundamentals, the quality of player, etc., the quality of fixture, etc., etc. Then let's look at Erling Haaland in isolation. On top of that, is he genuinely going to outscore Jackson over this next period? I don't think so, genuinely, right? Because Jackson's fixture from a stylistic standpoint are so good. He's in such good form. I would say that Chelsea's dynamics are flowing and operating at a much higher efficiency rate than City's are at the moment. And yeah, sure, he's got De Bruyne to come back in, and that will undoubtedly help quite a lot. But, maybe it hurts City in terms of their overall dynamics. Maybe that has a knock-on effect as essentially a behind the scenes negative effect as a result of that? We don't know, right? Because one thing they're struggling, one category they're struggling in is that defensive side, and De Bruyne is not exactly helping you in that category. Then is he going to really drop Phil Foden for a consistent period? Again, not sure. And if he keeps rotating them, neither of them really able to develop flow and rhythm, and quite big on that. So there's a lot of things there. And then obviously we've got the price. So for me, I think this is a sell. I think this is the easiest sell you will get when it comes to Erling Haaland, because he'll never probably be worse position with regards to price and form. Should you sell him for a hit? Similar to Bruno Fernandes, very situational. How bullish are you on Jackson and Saka compared to myself? Are you more bullish on Haaland away at Look, I'm not saying he can't return. He could score a hat-trick, and I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. It's just unlikely, and the conditions aren't really there for him in which to thrive compared to other fixtures, compared to other players, and the floor really isn't there with Van Dijk and Konate. Albeit if Konate's out and City have a good start, you really never know. So for the people in the position of having one free transfer, would I, like I said, situational? Personally, yes, because I would be giving the armband to Saka. Even if you're not, though, personally, I still would. That's how much upside I associate with the likes of like Jackson and Saka in this particular week. But if you're not as bullish on them, then keep like a Haaland Semenyo. That's a combo I've seen a few times, like Haaland Semenyo to someone and someone. Naturally, captaincy dependent to an extent, but there's a lot of upside to be had. Moving on, a lot of you are looking to ship out the likes of Rico Lewis. You would just like to improve your defense. So who would my ideal replacement be? As spoken about in the Arsenal section in the Everything You Need to Know video, and I would strongly recommend watching that if you have not. There's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot in there which could help. For me, Yuri and Timber, my absolute favorite. I think the triple up of Gabriel, Timber, and Saka, absolutely brilliant for this upcoming run, and I would love to have it myself, and I may do so in the near future. If you saw my team selection yesterday, what you're getting from him is overlaps, underlaps, ability to combine in small spaces. So he's certainly got the quality to deliver against low blocks in those attacking positions. He's direct from set pieces, etc., etc., and also the volume in which he can return due to what he's doing on the pitch. So for me, Yuri and Timber, brilliant, especially at 5-5, getting the cheapest way into the Arsenal defense, especially when it's logistically the best way as well, compared to Raya, who's at a similar price, but is a goalkeeper, and you'd rather have a 4.5 in that spot, in my opinion. Ryan Knight-Nori, if you don't have him, high ceiling and decent floor, because very obvious, always in these brilliant attacking positions, has the quality to deliver from them, and the fixtures are pretty decent, so there's some likelihood of a clean sheet. I say decent floor for the reasons I mentioned earlier. When you have a decent clean sheet prospect on one side, and it is decent and not better than that, and also the attacking upside as well, even if one isn't so present, at least you have the other for the floor to be somewhat consistent. Or he's cheap, he's 4-4. The upside present for all of the reasons I spoke about earlier when I was speaking about my team. But he does require a rotation partner. For example, if you play him this week away to Palace, then you bench him next week. Away to Brentford's a bit meh. 16-17, you absolutely play him against Ipswich and Leicester. Then you'll be looking to bench him for a bit, and so on and so on. So for me, if you have a partner that rotates nicely for him, or you can get one next week, I would like that. That being said, I think you want to use transfers in the most efficient way at any time in the game, but especially now given the congestion of game weeks, and is using 2 transfers in consecutive weeks for defenders the most efficient use? Maybe not, dependent on how aggressive you want to go, how well your team's set up, and what fixtures you're looking to target, and your general strategy and overview and philosophy. Van Hex, very much via media of all of these, right? Gives you good fixtures for a decent amount of time, 5-6 game weeks. Gives you minutes, but there's probably not as much upside associated with him. Brighton certainly have the gene in them to concede a goal given the way they play. That all needs to be taken into account, but those 4-5 are my favourite options because I have not spoken about Emerson. Fixtures, yes, absolutely. After this week, though. Upside, yes, because open play threat, yeah. Quality to deliver from those positions, yeah. Set pieces, yeah. Saw that against Newcastle. But the clean sheet prospects for him, even though fixtures are decent, we've seen how susceptible West Ham are to being hurt on transition, and even in the middle, I'm still not convinced. I don't like the midfield makeup, and I think one day, if they continue with it, they're going to get hurt and hurt badly. Who knows? Maybe Arsenal give them that slapping that is potentially around the corner. I know they obviously beat Newcastle, but some element of luck in there, and some element of Newcastle not being so good. The last thing before we go on to the big topic is something I just thought about. Semenyo was presented to me as an option instead of Bowen early in the week. And then from that, I gave you my aggressive transfer plan strategy yesterday. And I was considering this, and I was like, if he was more expensive, I'd probably be attributing more value to an asset like him. And I thought I'd just talk about this psychological phenomenon a little bit. because I think it's very important that you're conscious of this. When something is a little bit cheaper, you probably place a little bit less value on it. For example, you go out and you buy a book, and the book is 10 quid as opposed to being £100. You're probably going to spend more time reading the £100 book, not necessarily because it's better, but because you feel like you've invested more into it. I think the same can be said and the same can be applied with the assets within FPL, right? And just because Semenyo's at 5.6 now or 5.7 doesn't mean he's a worse asset than Bowen. Just as an example, whether he is or isn't is something we can decide next week when we run the analysis. So not only would I not be selling him, but I'd potentially be looking at acquiring him and then potentially redistributing the funds elsewhere, or just leaving the money in the bank for a later date because it's always, 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 always useful. And the other thing with him is that I haven't mentioned his fixtures, arguably from 14 when he's coming back from suspension, are arguably better than anyone else's from an attacking standpoint. So that's certainly something. Finally, we arrive at the big topic for this game week, and the question which keeps getting asked again and again and again by so many across so many different platforms, across so many different channels and accounts. Captaincy. Who is the best captain? I think we've probably established by now, right? There is no correct choice, and within a certain region, there is no wrong choice either. There's a few that are very, very close together, and it'll play out however it plays out, and there will be a huge element of luck involved. For me personally, outside of Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Mbeumo, not outside of them, but amongst them, you cannot make a wrong decision. I would still have Mbeumo as fourth, and I'm not entirely sure if I should be putting him in that category, but nonetheless, he's there. Into here, 2 like /3, I would have Cunha, Jackson, and João Pedro. I think they all have different risks associated to them, hence why I wouldn't put them in that tier 1 category. I think I would, if I had to, like Salah, Palmer, Saka, tier 1, Mbeumo maybe like tier 1.5, and then Jackson, Cunha, and João Pedro floating in 2 and 3. For example, João Pedro expected minutes, and that's the main thing. Also, I haven't seen him haul big yet. Jackson, fundamentals, probably loses like 10 expected minutes at the end of the game, potentially. No penalties, no set pieces. There's that. Cunha plays for the worst side out of any of these guys. Born the better side than Wolves, so that's that to consider. For sure, from a matchup stylistic perspective, yeah, really good, but then obviously you have to factor that in. Hence why I don't think I would go there. Albeit I'd probably warm the Jackson a little bit out of those three. I would go for the top 4. And I think we can talk about the football stuff, but we've done that at length already. I'm going to go more onto the risk rewards type of stuff with these guys. Before I do that, I did include Son as the 9th option in the captaincy. And especially after what I've seen in the development, he could very well be a sell for Saka and Palmer. And I personally would happily sell him for Saka or Palmer if you are particularly bullish on them. Yeah, fine, you're losing Fulham at home. But we've established that Fulham can be quite a difficult side from a defensive standpoint to face. Whereas Villa and West Ham, in my opinion, won't pose as big of a challenge. Maybe, obviously, Villa are a much better side, but not in the greatest bit of form. Chelsea a decent matchup on the blue side, so and there's that to factor in. Also, if you look at the assets you're going to be getting Jackson, right, or Palmer. So I'd be more bullish on Saka, but I think the grounds are there. Go Son to Palmer as well, and I would personally be set in your position. But I'd be doing it for a hit. Again, it comes down to what I said earlier. Are you going to captain him? Because if you are, that makes it so much easier to justify. And if not, then how bearish or bullish are you on both, and what's the gap? Okay, final thoughts. And I'm very much going to talk about Salah, Palmer, and Saka here as my top 3, and why. Not necessarily why I'm going Saka, but like just provide you with something that you can use to justify. In terms of your player strategy, where do you fall on the spectrum of wanting to do amazingly well, like winning the game, and being delighted with the top 10k rank, and not really caring about anything past that? Because if you do want to get to these very, very, very high upper echelons, you've got to accept some risk, and you will get the rewards at times, but you will at least have that on offer to you. In this type of week, when it's so close, I think, and we're just going to assume that for now, the football is neutral, right? Across all 3, it's neutral. It's not, but we're going to assume that because there's little in it. You've got the least reward with Salah, given the effective ownership will be the highest, and you've got the most with Saka. So from that standpoint, especially if you're looking to attack those upper echelons, I personally think that's a fantastic justification in a week like this to accept more risk and go Saka, especially if you've got the stomach for it, right? Especially if you can just be like, okay, you know what, I took on the risk, doesn't happen, all good. I also think this is a good week for those who are more in tune with their intuition, who are better traditionally with their feel and gut picks, to go and use this type of resource, maybe more than they would have done so in the past, where they used the logical cold side of the brain to try and find a little edge in a way that is maybe not so traditional. I also think that is a very sensible and good route to success potentially. For me personally, I still think Saka's the best from a football standpoint, albeit super close. And then when you kick in the risk, for me, it lands on Saka. I would have Palmer as 2 and then Salah as 3, just because City are still City, and I respect that. Um, but yeah, I think I can make a very good case if I had to, if I was forced to, like being on the prosecution and the defense, to make an argument that Salah is one. So yeah, it's super close, but I just wanted to present to you that risk reward thing, talk about Son a little bit, talk about a few other options, and then obviously you guys will decide as you do. Finally, if you have not watched the Everything You Need to Know video where all the football analysis is contained, I would definitely recommend going to watch that. And look at this screen. You see Haaland with a 34 pointer, one which many of us captured. And you know what? That could be the result for you this week, even amongst the variants. So make sure to be somewhat optimistic. That is all she wrote for the Solving Your Problems video, Game Week 13 edition. And this is also all she wrote for Game Week 13 content in general. I hope you enjoyed this week's content. We'll be back very, very soon on Sunday, and then on Monday, and on Tuesday as well for Game Week 14. The best of luck to you. Enjoy your weekend. Remember, regardless of what happens, you can choose how you react, and you don't have to already get upset over it. Enjoy the highs and try to enjoy the lows. I shall see you on the other side. The best of luck to you, and especially if you're captaining Zaka.